If the woman inside starts singing, don't stand near the glass. The old technician's trembling voice crackled through the static-filled hallway just moments before the emergency medics rushed him away on a floating stretcher. Ethan Cole watched the man disappear around the corner beneath flashing crimson lights, then glanced back at the sealed titanium door towering nearly 30 feet high in front of him. Frost crawled across the vault's surface like pale veins. Somewhere deep inside the mountain-sized station, warning sirens pulsed with a slow mechanical rhythm that Ethan could feel through the soles of his boots. Titan 9 wasn't the kind of place people got assigned to. It was the kind of place people got buried in. The underground facility sat almost 3 miles beneath the frozen crust of Neptune's moon Triton, hidden beneath layers of military secrecy and reinforced steel. Officially, Ethan had been transferred there as a systems maintenance specialist after a reactor accident on Europa Station left half his crew unemployed. Unofficially, he suspected somebody powerful wanted him forgotten. The elevator ride down had lasted 11 minutes. Nobody spoke during it. Nobody even looked at him. He remembered the silence more than anything else. Not fear, not hostility, just silence. The kind that settled over people who stopped asking questions years ago. Ethan adjusted the collar of his dark gray work jacket and stepped toward the main observation chamber. The air smelled sterile and cold, recycled too many times through aging filtration systems. Above him, fluorescent strips buzzed weakly, casting pale blue reflections across rows of monitoring screens. Most of them displayed unreadable symbols scrolling endlessly downward. Others showed biometric data that made no sense to him at all. Heart rate, neural fluctuations, atmospheric pressure. One screen simply read subject active in blinking white text. "You're late," a woman's voice muttered from the control station. Ethan turned to see Lieutenant Mira Vance slouched behind a holographic console, dark circles beneath her eyes, and an untouched cup of coffee sitting beside her shaking hand. "Transport delay," Ethan replied. "Nobody told me this place was falling apart." "It's not falling apart," she said quietly. "It's waiting." Ethan frowned slightly. "For what?" Mira looked toward the giant vault door and didn't answer. That bothered him more than if she had. She slid a data tablet across the console instead. "Containment protocols. Read them carefully." Ethan skimmed the list. No direct physical contact. No unsupervised communication beyond scheduled interaction windows. No emotional engagement. No discussion of Earth government operations. He raised an eyebrow. Emotional engagement? Mira finally looked at him directly. "You'll understand after you meet her." Before Ethan could ask another question, the entire station dimmed for half a second. A low vibration rolled through the chamber. Then came the sound. Soft at first, almost too distant to notice. Singing. Ethan froze. The voice drifting through the steel walls wasn't human. It carried a strange layered harmony that made the air itself feel heavier, like standing underwater. Beautiful. Sad. Ancient. Every technician in the room immediately stopped moving. One man near the security terminal quietly removed his headset and left without saying a word. Myra's fingers tightened around her coffee cup hard enough to crack the lid. "That's impossible," she whispered. "She never sings anymore." Then the vault door began to open. Massive locking bolts retracted one by one with thunderous metallic groans. Cold vapor spilled across the floor as the chamber beyond slowly revealed itself. Ethan expected chains, restraints, maybe some kind of monstrous creature hidden in darkness. Instead, he saw a woman sitting alone beside a small metal table beneath a single hanging light. Her skin shimmered deep blue beneath the pale glow. Silver hair cascaded over one shoulder like liquid moonlight. And despite being sealed inside the most secure containment vault in human history, she was reading a book. Slowly, she lifted her eyes toward the glass separating them. The singing stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the alien woman smiled faintly and spoke in perfect English. "You're new." The woman behind the glass closed. Her book with careful, deliberate movements, as if she had all the time in the universe. Ethan could hear the faint click of the cover even through 6 inches of reinforced crystal. The sound somehow felt louder than the station alarms echoing through the chamber. "You are staring," she said calmly. Her voice carried that same strange layered resonance from before, soft and musical beneath the metallic hum of the vault systems. Ethan realized he had been staring. He cleared his throat and folded his arms across his chest. I was expecting something different. A faint smile touched her lips. That usually means they expected something frightening. Behind Ethan, Lieutenant Mira Vance stood up, so quickly her chair rolled backward into a console. Interaction time is over, she snapped. Seal the chamber. Nobody moved. The technicians avoided looking at the woman behind the glass. One younger operator near the surveillance monitors looked pale enough to faint. Ethan noticed that every security camera inside the vault was pointed toward her from different angles except one. The camera directly above her chair had been manually disconnected. Its wires hung loose from the ceiling like dead vines. Why is she in here? Ethan asked quietly. Myra's jaw tightened. Need to know clearance. I work here now. Then learn the first rule of Titan 9. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do not ask her personal questions. The alien woman watched them silently from the other side of the glass, silver eyes reflecting the red emergency lights overhead. Ethan had met dangerous people before. Smugglers, mercenaries, military officers who smiled while ruining lives from behind polished desks. This woman did not remind him of any of them. She looked tired. Not physically tired. Older than that somehow. Like someone who had spent too many years listening to silence. What is your name? She asked suddenly. Ethan glanced at Mira. The lieutenant looked ready to drag him out of the room herself. He ignored her. Ethan Cole. The woman repeated it slowly. Ethan. The way she said his name sent a strange chill through him. Not fear. Recognition. I am Lyra Vale. Somewhere behind the walls, another alarm sounded. This one sharper. Urgent. Mira immediately checked the data scrolling across her wrist display. Power fluctuation in Sector 4, she muttered. Again. Ethan looked back toward the vault. You have a book in there. Lyra glanced down at the worn hardcover resting on the table beside her. Observation skills. Impressive. I thought prisoners got monitored, not libraries. I am not a prisoner. Her answer came instantly. Calm. Certain. Ethan frowned slightly. Then what are you? For the first time since he arrived, the faint smile disappeared from her face. Silence settled heavily between them. The overhead lights flickered once. Twice. Then stabilized again with a low electrical buzz. Lyra leaned back slowly in her chair, silver hair catching the pale glow above her. That, she said softly, depends on who survived the war. Ethan felt the room change after those words. The technicians stopped pretending not to listen. Mira looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Even the station noise seemed quieter. He opened his mouth to ask another question when every monitor in the chamber suddenly went black at once. The lights dimmed hard enough to throw the room into near darkness. Somewhere deep below the floor, massive generators groaned like something waking beneath the ice. Then a voice crackled through the station intercom. Containment breach warning. Level Omega protocols initiating. Ethan instinctively turned toward Mira. What does that mean? But she was not looking at him anymore. She was staring at Lyra. And for the first time since Ethan arrived on Titan 9, the woman inside the vault looked afraid. The station lights dropped to emergency power with a sharp electrical snap that echoed through the containment chamber like a gunshot. Red backup strips flickered along the floor, painting everything in dim crimson shadows. Ethan instinctively stepped closer to the observation glass, while technicians scrambled between darkened consoles trying to restore system access. Somewhere overhead, heavy blast doors began sealing shut one by one across Titan 9. The vibrations rolled through the walls like distant thunder beneath the ice. Containment breach warning. Level Omega protocols active. The automated announcement repeated again, colder this time. More urgent. Ethan looked toward Lyra. She had risen from her chair now, her expression unreadable except for the tension in her silver eyes. The calm composure she carried moments earlier was gone. What breached containment? Ethan asked sharply. Lieutenant Mira Vance did not answer immediately. Her hands moved rapidly across a dead console screen before she slammed her fist against it in frustration. The system is not responding. Mira, Ethan's voice hardened. What is happening? She finally looked at him. Nobody knows. The words settled badly in the room. Nobody knows. Not exactly comforting 3 miles underground beside the most heavily guarded being in human space. Ethan glanced back toward the vault glass. Lyra stood perfectly still beneath the hanging light, pale blue reflections shimmering across her skin. She did not look dangerous. She looked like someone listening for footsteps in the dark. This has happened before, Ethan realized aloud. Mira hesitated too long before answering. Power fluctuations happen sometimes. That is not what I meant. Lyra spoke before Mira could continue. The station is reacting to me. Ethan frowned. Reacting how? Lyra slowly approached the transparent barrier separating them. The reinforced crystal hummed softly as she stopped inches away from it. Up close, Ethan noticed faint glowing patterns beneath her skin near her collarbone and wrists. Not tattoos. Something biological. They pulsed faintly with the same rhythm as the station alarms. Titan 9 was not built to contain me, she said quietly. It was built to study what happens near me. A deep metallic groan suddenly echoed through the chamber. One of the far security doors slid halfway open before slamming shut again. Sparks rained briefly from the ceiling. Several technicians immediately backed away from their stations in panic. Ethan could feel it now too. A pressure in the air. Subtle but wrong. Like static building before a lightning strike. Mira activated a handheld scanner with shaking fingers. Energy output is climbing again. From where? Ethan asked. She looked toward Lyra without speaking. Ethan turned back toward the glass. You are causing this. Lyra's expression tightened slightly. No, another pause. But it follows me. Before Ethan could process that answer, the overhead speakers crackled violently with distorted interference. Then a new voice came through the intercom. Male. Cold. Military. All personnel are ordered to evacuate Containment Sector 7 immediately. Myra's face lost color. No. Failure to comply will initiate automatic lockdown procedures. Ethan stepped toward the nearest console. What kind of lockdown? Nobody answered fast enough. Massive steel barriers instantly dropped from the ceiling with explosive force, sealing every exit around the chamber. The sound shook dust from the overhead pipes. Several technicians screamed. One man pounded uselessly against the newly sealed door. Ethan spun toward Mira. You said this was a containment warning. It is. Then why are they locking us in here? Mira stared at the sealed exits in horror. Because Omega Protocol does not protect the station. Slowly, she looked back toward the woman behind the glass. It protects everyone outside it. Silence swallowed the room. Ethan felt his pulse quicken beneath the collar of his jacket. Behind the reinforced barrier, Lyra closed her eyes for just a moment, like someone hearing a terrible memory returning from very far away. Then she opened them again and looked directly at Ethan. You should not have come back tomorrow, she whispered. For the next 20 minutes, nobody spoke louder than a whisper. Titan 9 felt less like a military facility now and more like a tomb waiting to seal itself shut forever. Emergency lights pulsed slowly across the containment chamber while technicians fought to regain control of the failing systems. Ethan sat at the central console pretending to study diagnostics he barely understood, but his attention kept drifting toward the woman behind the glass. Lyra had returned to her chair beneath the hanging light. The book rested closed in her lap now. She had not opened it again since the lockdown began. Every few minutes, the faint glowing patterns beneath her skin flickered softly, synchronized with the strange vibrations moving through the station walls. Ethan noticed she winced each time it happened. What are those markings? He finally asked. Lieutenant Mira Vance looked up sharply from across the room. Do not engage outside scheduled communication windows. Ethan ignored her. Lyra lowered her eyes briefly toward her wrists. Limiters, she answered quietly. Biological restraints. Ethan frowned. They implanted restraints into your body. No. A faint sadness crossed her expression. My own people did. The answer lingered heavily in the stale recycled air. Ethan leaned back in his chair slowly, studying her more carefully now. He had spent years around military technology. Exosuits, neural links, combat implants. But nothing about Lyra looked mechanical. The glowing patterns beneath her skin resembled veins carrying light instead of blood. Beautiful in a way that felt unnatural. Ancient. Mira approached him quietly and lowered her voice. You need to stop talking to her like this. Ethan glanced at her. Like what? Like she is normal. He looked back toward the vault. Lyra was watching them again through the reinforced crystal, calm and silent beneath the pale light overhead. She seems more normal than half the people on this station. Mira did not smile. You did not see what happened 12 years ago. Before Ethan could ask, Another tremor rolled through Titan 9. This one stronger. Ceiling dust drifted down across the consoles. Somewhere deep in the facility, metal shrieked loudly against metal. Several warning indicators flashed back online at once. Reactor instability. Magnetic field fluctuation. Quantum resonance spike. Ethan blinked at the readings. What the hell is quantum resonance? Something we should not have experimented with, Mira muttered. Across the chamber, Lyra suddenly stood up too quickly, gripping the edge of the table beside her as if trying to steady herself. The glowing patterns along her arms brightened sharply beneath her blue skin. Ethan was already moving before he realized it. He crossed the chamber toward the observation glass. Lyra. She pressed one hand against her temple, breathing unevenly now. It is getting louder. What is? Her silver eyes lifted toward him slowly. Fear lived there now. Real fear. The signal. Ethan felt the temperature in the chamber drop several degrees. Frost spread suddenly across sections of the vault glass in delicate white fractures. Behind him, alarms screamed back to life all at once. Mira grabbed her scanner with shaking hands. Energy levels are spiking off the charts. Ethan barely heard her. Lyra stumbled slightly inside the containment room, catching herself against the wall. The hanging light above her flickered violently. Open the secondary dampeners, Mira shouted toward the technicians. Now. One nervous operator looked up from his station, pale-faced. They are already active. Silence hit the room like a physical thing. Then every monitor in the chamber flashed white simultaneously. For one impossible second, Ethan saw symbols racing across the screens in a language he did not recognize. Curved shapes. Pulsing patterns. Almost alive. Lyra looked directly at him through the frozen glass. Ethan, she whispered weakly. Someone found me. And somewhere far above the buried station beneath miles of ice and darkness, something answered. The answer came through the station not as a sound, but as a feeling. Every screen in the containment chamber flickered with pale white interference, while the air itself seemed to vibrate deep inside Ethan's chest. Several technicians dropped to their knees, clutching their heads in confusion. One older engineer stared upward at nothing, whispering numbers under his breath like he was listening to a voice nobody else could hear. Ethan grabbed the edge of the nearest console to steady himself. What is happening? Myra's scanner emitted a sharp warning tone before shutting itself off completely. External signal detected, she whispered. That is impossible. Across the vault, Lyra remained pressed against the frozen wall, breathing harder now. The glowing patterns beneath her skin had spread higher along her neck, faint lines of silver-blue light pulsing beneath the surface like living circuitry. Ethan stepped closer to the reinforced glass. Lyra, look at me. Her eyes lifted slowly toward his. For a moment, he saw exhaustion there so deep it barely looked human anymore. They were never supposed to find this station, she said softly. Who? Ethan asked. She closed her eyes briefly before answering. The ones who built the signal. Another tremor shook Titan 9. Somewhere in the distance, heavy machinery screamed against failing support structures. Frost crept farther across the containment windows. Red emergency lights flashed over Lyra's face in uneven pulses, making her silver eyes appear almost luminous in the darkness. Mira hurried toward Ethan and grabbed his arm. You need to move away from the vault. Why? Because every time she reacts, the station reacts. Ethan pulled free gently but firmly. She is not doing this on purpose. Mira stared at him in disbelief. You have known her for less than 24 hours. Ethan glanced back toward Lyra. And she still seems more honest than command. Mira looked like she wanted to argue, but before she could speak, the chamber intercom crackled alive once more. This time the voice sounded distorted beneath layers of static. Priority transmission incoming from Earth Command. Every technician in the room froze. A large central monitor slowly rebooted itself, bathing the chamber in cold white light. The image that appeared showed a man in a dark military uniform seated beneath the emblem of the United Earth Defense Council. Silver-haired, severe expression. Admiral Nathan Vale. Ethan recognized him immediately from military broadcasts. The Admiral wasted no time. All Titan 9 personnel are ordered to maintain Omega containment at all costs. His voice echoed harshly through the chamber speakers. No exceptions. Mira straightened instinctively. Sir, we are experiencing severe resonance instability, and I am aware, Lieutenant. The Admiral's eyes shifted briefly toward the vault camera feed displaying Lyra behind the glass. His expression hardened further. Under no circumstances is Subject Veil to be released. Subject Veil. Ethan glanced toward Lyra. She lowered her eyes the moment the Admiral spoke her name. Sir, Ethan interrupted carefully. With respect, what exactly is she? Silence followed for 2 full seconds. The Admiral looked directly at Ethan now, studying him. You are the new technician. Yes, sir. Then listen carefully, Mr. Cole. The Admiral leaned slightly closer toward the camera. 12 years ago, entire fleets disappeared because of that woman. The room fell silent except for the low hum of failing systems. Ethan looked back toward the vault instinctively. Lyra did not defend herself, did not argue. She simply stood there beneath the dim light, looking impossibly alone. That is not the full story, she whispered quietly. The Admiral's voice sharpened instantly. Do not speak to him. Lyra lifted her silver eyes slowly toward the screen. Calm returned to her face now, but it was the calm of someone exhausted from carrying the same wound too long. You told them I started the war, she said softly. Because it was easier than admitting what you found. A strange look crossed the Admiral's face then. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. The connection suddenly cut out. Every screen in the chamber went dark again at once. Then somewhere far above the frozen moon, something enormous moved beneath the stars. The silence after the transmission ended felt heavier than the alarms. Nobody in the containment chamber moved for several seconds. Technicians stared at dead monitors glowing faintly with static while cold air hissed through overhead vents. Somewhere far beyond the buried walls of Triton 9, something had answered Lyra's signal. Ethan could feel it now in the station itself. The vibrations had changed. Less random, more rhythmic, like footsteps approaching from very far away. Mira finally exhaled shakily and ran both hands through her dark hair. We need to prepare emergency cryo protocols. Ethan looked at her. For who? She hesitated. For everyone. Across the glass, Lyra slowly returned to her chair. The glowing lines beneath her skin dimmed slightly, but Ethan could still see faint pulses of silver blue moving beneath her wrists and throat. She looked exhausted now, the kind of exhaustion that reached into the bones. Ethan stepped closer to the observation. Barrier again, despite the nervous glances from the others. What did the Admiral mean? He asked quietly. About fleets disappearing. Lyra did not answer immediately. Her fingers rested lightly against the closed book in her lap. Do humans always ask dangerous questions this calmly? Ethan shrugged faintly. Usually means nobody else is telling the truth. For the first time since the transmission ended, a small tired smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. It faded quickly. 12 years ago, she said softly. Your people found something drifting beyond mapped space. Ethan listened carefully. Even the technicians nearby stopped pretending not to. An object older than any known civilization, buried inside a dead star system. Her silver eyes lowered slightly. My people warned them not to touch it. Mira stiffened visibly. Lyra. They activated it anyway, Lyra continued. And the signal began. The overhead lights flickered hard enough to plunge the chamber into darkness for half a second. When the power stabilized again, frost covered nearly the entire observation window. Ethan could see his own reflection layered faintly over hers now. Human and alien separated by frozen glass and secrets older than war. What signal? He asked. Lyra's expression tightened. A call. To who? She looked directly at him then. We never learned their name. A low mechanical boom rolled through the station above them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. One technician cursed under his breath as another console went offline. Mira activated her wrist communicator repeatedly, but only static answered. Surface communication is gone, she muttered. Ethan barely heard her. His attention stayed fixed on Lyra. The Admiral blamed you for all this. Because I survived it. Her voice remained calm, but something painful moved beneath it now. When the signal awakened, ships vanished without debris. Entire crews disappeared from sealed compartments. Systems stopped obeying physics. Your commanders panicked. Ethan frowned. And you? Lyra looked down at her glowing hands. I shut the signal down. Silence settled again. Ethan studied her face carefully, searching for deception and finding only exhaustion. Then why lock you in here for 12 years? This time her smile carried no warmth at all. Because the signal never stopped calling back to me. Somewhere deep in Titan 9, warning sirens suddenly shifted pitch. Higher now. Urgent. Red emergency symbols flashed across every remaining operational screen in the chamber. Approach detected. Ethan turned sharply toward the nearest monitor. A grainy orbital feed flickered into view through heavy interference. At first he could not understand what he was seeing. Then the image stabilized. Something enormous floated above Triton's atmosphere. Not a ship. Not exactly. The object looked almost organic beneath the storm clouds, dark and smooth like black stone shaped by deep ocean currents. No visible engines. No weapons. Just impossible size drifting silently over the frozen moon. Every person in the chamber stopped breathing at once. Lyra closed her eyes slowly when she saw it. They came faster this time, she whispered. Then, all throughout Titan 9, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed Titan 9 completely. For several terrifying seconds, Ethan could hear nothing except distant machinery grinding beneath the frozen moon and the uneven breathing of people trapped underground with something they did not understand. Then emergency backup lights flickered weakly back to life one strip at a time, casting long red shadows across the containment chamber. The orbital feed was gone. Every monitor had turned black again, but Ethan could still see the image burned into his mind. That impossible object hanging silently above Triton, like a piece of space itself, had come alive. Somewhere nearby, a technician began quietly praying under his breath. Mira moved quickly across the chamber checking dead consoles, but panic had finally broken through her military composure. Reactor output is collapsing, she muttered. Life support is rerouting power manually. Ethan barely listened. His attention remained fixed on Lyra behind the frost-covered glass. She had not moved since the blackout. Pale blue light pulsed faintly beneath her skin while cold vapor curled around her bare feet across the floor of the vault. She looked less like a prisoner now and more like someone waiting for an execution that had already begun years ago. Ethan approached the observation barrier slowly. Lyra, her silver eyes lifted toward him. Tired. Sad. Strangely gentle despite everything happening around them. You should leave the lower levels, she said softly. There is nowhere to leave to. Ethan replied. The station sealed itself. Lyra glanced briefly toward the ceiling as another deep vibration rolled through Titan 9. Then you should stay away from me. Ethan let out a quiet breath through his nose. Everybody here keeps saying that. For the first time in hours, something almost human flickered across her expression. Amusement. Small and fragile. And yet you continue ignoring good advice. Before Ethan could answer, Mira hurried toward him holding a datapad filled with flashing warning symbols. The outer magnetic shield is failing, she said. If it collapses completely, that thing above us will lock onto the station directly. Ethan frowned. Can we stop it? Mira looked toward Lyra. Only she knows how. Silence settled heavily again. Ethan turned back toward the vault. You said you shut the signal down before. Lyra lowered her eyes. At a cost. What kind of cost? She hesitated long enough for him to realize she genuinely did not want to answer. The signal is not technology, she whispered finally. It responds to consciousness. Ethan stared at her. I do not understand. Neither did we. Her glowing hands tightened slightly around the edge of the table beside her. The objects out there listened to thought. Emotion. Memory. Fear. Mira stepped closer uneasily. That is impossible. Lyra looked at her calmly. So was faster-than-light travel once. Another violent tremor shook the chamber hard enough to knock tools from nearby workstations. Overhead pipes hissed loudly as freezing condensation spilled across the floor like fog. Somewhere in the station, metal screamed under pressure. Then the intercom suddenly activated again. Not with Admiral Vale's voice this time. This voice sounded automated. Final. Omega contingency initiated. Station self-termination sequence begins. In 20 minutes. Every technician in the chamber froze. Mira went pale. No. Ethan grabbed the nearest console. Self-termination. They are going to destroy Titan 9, Mira whispered. From orbit. Panic spread instantly through the room. One technician rushed toward the sealed exit, pounding uselessly against solid steel. Another simply sat down and stared blankly at the floor. Ethan slowly turned back toward Lyra behind the glass. She already knew. He could see it in her eyes. They are trying to kill you, he said quietly. Lyra's expression barely changed. No. Her silver gaze drifted upward toward the ceiling as distant vibrations continued shaking the station around them. They are trying to stop what follows me. Then suddenly every light inside the vault flashed brilliant white. Lyra gasped sharply and collapsed to one knee as the glowing patterns beneath her skin ignited like veins of liquid starlight. Ethan instinctively slammed his hand against the frozen glass. Lyra. She looked up at him through the blinding light, fear finally breaking through her calm voice. Ethan, do not let them open the sky. The countdown clock appeared across every surviving screen in the containment chamber in harsh red numbers. 19 minutes. 58 seconds. Triton 9 suddenly felt much smaller than before. Smaller and colder. Ethan stared through the frost-covered glass at Lyra kneeling beneath the blinding white light inside the vault while the station trembled around them like a dying machine. The glowing patterns beneath her skin had spread across both arms now, branching like rivers of silver fire beneath deep blue water. Every pulse of light made the walls hum louder. What does she mean by opening the sky? One terrified technician whispered. Mira did not answer. She was already moving between consoles trying to override the station lockdown. But every command returned the same message. Omega Authority override denied. Ethan barely noticed the others anymore. His focus stayed on Lyra. She looked up at him through the frozen barrier, breathing unevenly. Ethan, she said softly, listen carefully. He stepped closer. I am listening. Another tremor rolled. Through Triton 9. Somewhere overhead, distant metal collapsed with a low thunderous groan beneath the pressure shifting through the station. Frost drifted from the ceiling like pale snow. Lyra pressed one glowing hand against the glass, separating them. Ethan hesitated only a second before placing his own hand opposite hers on the other side. The crystal between them vibrated faintly beneath his palm. The objects above your world are not ships, she whispered. They are doors. Ethan frowned. Doors to where? Her silver eyes lowered briefly. We never discovered that safely. The red countdown clock continued ticking downward across the monitors. 18 minutes. 31 seconds. Mira approached quickly beside him. Ethan, move away from the barrier. No, her resonance levels are destabilizing. She is trying to help us. Mira looked genuinely torn now. Fear and exhaustion had worn down the sharp military edge in her voice. You do not understand what happened the last time. Ethan glanced toward her. Then explain it. Silence lingered for a moment before Mira finally spoke. 12 years ago, the fleet investigating the signal lost contact near the dead system Lyra mentioned. Ships disappeared one after another without damage. Without debris. The only survivor was her. Ethan looked back toward Lyra. Because she shut it down. Myra's expression darkened. That is not the part Command cared about. The overhead lights flickered violently again. Lyra closed her eyes briefly as another pulse of silver light spread beneath her skin. The signal changes people, she whispered weakly. It amplifies thought. Fear becomes panic. Curiosity becomes obsession. Ethan suddenly remembered the technician praying under his breath earlier. The others staring at dead screens like they heard invisible voices. Triton 9 was already being affected. Why are you connected to it? He asked quietly. Lyra looked at him for a very long time before answering. Because my people built the first door. The chamber felt completely silent. Even Mira stopped moving. Ethan felt cold settle deep in his chest. Your people created this? Lyra nodded faintly. Long before humans discovered space travel. We thought we had found a way to communicate across galaxies instantly. Her expression tightened painfully. Instead, we answered something. Another violent shudder tore through Triton 9 hard enough to crack sections of the observation glass. Alarm screamed immediately. One technician stumbled backward in panic as spiderweb fractures spread across the frozen barrier between Ethan and Lyra. Mira grabbed Ethan's shoulder. We need to evacuate this chamber now. But Ethan barely heard her. Through the fractured glass, Lyra suddenly looked terrified in a way he had not seen before. Not for herself. For him. Ethan, she whispered urgently. When the station opens above us, they will see every mind down here. The countdown clock hit 17 minutes exactly. Then somewhere above the frozen moon, something enormous answered with a sound that was not quite mechanical and not entirely alive. The sound from above Triton rolled through Titan 9 like a whale call beneath a frozen ocean. Deep, endless, wrong in a way Ethan could feel behind his eyes. Every remaining light in the containment chamber flickered violently, while the fractured observation glass groaned under mounting pressure. The countdown clock continued bleeding red numbers across the monitors. 16 minutes. 12 seconds. Around him, technicians were breaking apart under the strain. One man sat motionless against the wall, whispering to someone who was not there. Another stared upward at the ceiling with tears running silently down his face. Ethan finally understood what Lyra meant. The signal was inside the station now. Inside people. Mira stepped back from the dead console slowly, horror draining the color from her face. The orbital defense network just went offline, she whispered. Earth Command cannot stop it anymore. Another tremor shook the chamber. Small cracks raced farther across the frozen observation barrier. Lyra looked toward them with visible panic now. Ethan, listen to me carefully. He moved closer immediately. I am here. Her glowing hand pressed harder against the fractured crystal between them. The station is not containing me anymore. Ethan frowned. Then what is it doing? For one long second, Lyra could not answer. Her silver eyes filled with a sadness so old it almost felt endless. It is containing the signal, using me. The realization hit Ethan hard enough to steal his breath. Titan 9 had never been a prison. It was a lock, and Lyra was the key holding it shut. Mira understood at the same moment. If the station self-destructs, Lyra nodded faintly. The door opens again. Silence swallowed the chamber. Somewhere above the frozen moon, the impossible object waiting in orbit answered with another low vibration that rattled the walls around them. Ethan looked toward the countdown clock. 15 minutes remaining. There has to be another way. Lyra gave a weak smile that somehow hurt more than fear. That is what I said 12 years ago. Ethan stared at her through cracked glass and emergency lights, and all the fear crawling through Titan 9. She had spent 12 years alone beneath miles of ice, carrying a burden no human government even understood. Not because she caused the disaster. Because she stopped it. Mira, Ethan said suddenly, open the vault. Mira looked at him like he had lost his mind. Absolutely not. If she is stabilizing the signal, we cannot leave her trapped in there while the station tears itself apart. Ethan, Omega Protocol exists for a reason. So does common sense. Another violent shudder tore through the chamber. This time part of the ceiling collapsed near the rear consoles, showering sparks and frozen debris across the floor. The countdown clock flickered dangerously. 14 minutes. Lyra closed her eyes sharply as the glowing patterns beneath her skin flared brighter than ever before. The walls themselves began humming around her. Ethan could feel the vibration through his boots now, through his teeth, through his heartbeat. Then Lyra suddenly looked directly at him with terrified urgency. Ethan, they see you now. Before he could ask what she meant, every screen in the chamber turned on simultaneously. Not with warnings, not with system data, with reflections. Hundreds of distorted reflections staring back from the monitors with pale, glowing eyes that were not human. The room temperature dropped instantly. Frost raced across the walls in branching white veins. Several technicians screamed in panic. Ethan stepped instinctively toward the vault, toward Lyra. And for the first time since arriving on Titan 9, the woman behind the glass reached toward him not like a prisoner or a monster, but like someone afraid to be alone. Open the door, she whispered. Please.